We're going to be in Genesis chapter 23 tonight. A relatively brief and maybe straightforward um, chapter. It's not the most theologically rich chapter of Genesis, but that's okay. They don't all have to be. If they were all super theologically rich, we would probably just glaze over and not really dig in where it's intended to. So there are a few nuggets here, I think, and we'll look at those. Genesis chapter 23. We will begin with the first four verses. Now Sarah lived 127 years and didn't look a day over 116. These were the years of the life of Sarah. Sarah died in Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham went in to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. Then Abraham rose from before his dead and spoke to the sons of Heth, saying, I am a stranger and a sojourner among you. Give me a burial site among you, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. Okay. Before we get into this really kind of entertaining negotiation scene, thought we'd throw it open, hopefully not throw it up, but throw it open for just thoughts on Sarah. If you learned anything, maybe you didn't learn anything from this trip to it, but what are your thoughts on Sarah, the mother of our faith? Sherry, Mindy, and Sherry LaCrosse all say hello.
But it kind of appears as though she might be the first one who was buried in the land of Canaan, which the other people were going to have to wander around in a whole long time, generations before they got to be there.
And that is significant. I mean, we talk about this being ultimately the promised land, the home for Israel. And this is a connection, really an eternal connection in a sense, for the Israelites to this place. I mean, the mother of their faith is buried here. My grandparents, my father's parents, are both buried in Wagner, Oklahoma, and that's kind of their ancestral, especially for my grandmother's side of the family. They can move all over, and then they end up back in Wagner towards the end, and they all die in Wagner and get buried in Wagner. And so I can go there and I can see all the Hardys and I guess some Pruitts and stuff like that there. That was my grandmother's side of the family. My dad will watch this and correct me on some of this stuff, I'm sure. But so I can go there whenever I'm in. It's not my favorite town in the world. It's kind of a podunky little town in northeast Oklahoma, but it's not bad. It's actually perking up a little bit. But whenever I go there, and I get there more often than I normally probably would, I do go by usually and see the cemetery and see where my grandparents are buried. And my great-grandparents are close by, some great uncle. And now I have a real uncle, just my dad's younger brother is buried there. Or he has a headstone there. Actually, his ashes got scattered in the Pacific Ocean, but he has a headstone there. So it's a place of connection, isn't it? When you bury someone that means a lot to you, it ties you to that spot to some extent. You want that grave maybe taken care of, and that for us, I guess y'all still do the grave decorations on Memorial Day and all that. So it really does kind of bind us in a way to a place. Israel's going to travel far and wide, and they're going to come back and get the land at a much higher price than Abraham's going to pay today. But it is an important connecting point to it. So because of who Sarah was, because she was so important.
I think it's a little sad to think that she had to wait till she was 100. And then she just had 27 years.
She was 90, I think, wasn't she?
Was she 90? 37 years.
He was still just a baby of 37 years. When
Yeah,
she,
to a mother you are. You really
I think
are.
she was 10 years younger than Abraham. Is that right? So she was 90 and he was 100, I think.
Okay, I was thinking,
I'm not great with numbers, so
yeah, but at
wasn't
that
certain.
age, it's still, it's hard to think of someone that few years with their children.
I don't know if it's significant, but it, like after he went with Isaac to the mountain and stuff, he went with the servants to Beersheba. And then as this starts out, it appears to me as though him and Sarah were not in the same place. And so in a way, she passed away alone too.
well, I don't know that she was alone. I would say that she disappears from the story. It's kind of unfortunate. Another unfortunate thing about Sarah is that really the last thing we read about her is wanting to kick Hagar and Ishmael out of family camp. And that's kind of our farewell. So she doesn't end on a high note of faith. It doesn't end with her joy around the birth of Isaac. It ends around the rancor around the weaning of Isaac and for her. And that's unfortunate. It's one of those things. The Bible just doesn't always say what we want it to say. And it's not always happy endings, and everybody was smiling all the way. At the same time, living to be 127 years old is a sign of God's favor on her. Long life, going to sleep with your family after that and all that. Of course, they didn't really get to do that because Abraham and Sarah left their family to start a new family all by themselves, their family. So Abraham is the patriarch of a whole new race of people and multiple races, really, multiple nations. So there's, kind of, Sarah was a little bit of a mixed bag. And I'm not calling her no bag or anything, but she's like most of us, has some strengths and some weaknesses. And, I think we can love her. And she's really a lot easier to love than her grandson, I think. But we can love her and be thankful for her and her life and her example, and still kind of respectfully look and see where maybe she dropped the ball a little bit. So, of course, her husband did too a few times. So it's a human story in its own way. It's supernatural. It's kind of this blending of the supernatural and the human. Because of the birth of Isaac is supernatural, but it was worked through humans. So if you were going to deliver the eulogy for Sarah, what would you say for her?
That she was a beautiful woman, they respected her, and he loved, and Abraham loved her. And she was willing to wait until however long it was. The Lord provided her to have a baby, and I think I'd laugh too if I found out.
So you and Robert are done with kids? No more?
Yeah. I think it would be kind of funny. I don't think I really don't feel like she was being disrespectful. But she was joyful about it.
It's always, I think, important when you look at something that is a failure for people in the Bible to consider their perspective. And, when we call Thomas Doubting Thomas, and we don't doubt because we believe, we have so much faith. Well, we didn't see what Thomas saw either, did we? We didn't see him dying on a cross. And we haven't never walked into a city where the Romans have crucified people all up and down the side of the road to make a point. And Thomas had done that probably. And none of those people came back. How many of us have seen somebody who was raised from the dead? mean, most of us don't even know anybody Mark was, but then he was he was there with the original 12. So actually, but it was, maybe someone who was declared dead, or they thought was brain dead. Maybe you think I'm brain dead. I don't know, but there's kind of some of those resuscitation stories that we get still, and those are joyful, in and of themselves. But Sarah has been childless for 9 decades. She has been postmenopausal for some of that time, at least. She's not. I mean, childbirth is completely off the radar, and then she gets told she's going to be a mother. So, how would we handle some news like that? Maybe not as well as she did. Hello to all from Nell. Hi, Nell. Any other thoughts on Sarah? Okay, let's move down to verses 5 through 16. The sons of Heth answered Abraham, saying to him, Hear us, my lord, you are a mighty prince among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our graves. None of us will refuse you his grave for burying your dead. So Abraham rose and bowed to the people of the land, the sons of Heth. And he spoke with them, saying, If it is your wish for me to bury my dead out of my sight, hear me and approach Ephron, the son of Zohar, for me, that he may give me the cave of Machpelah, which he owns, which is at the end of his field. For the full price, let him give it to me in your presence for a burial site. Now Ephron was sitting among the sons of Heth, and Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the hearing of the sons of Heth, even of all who went in at the gate of his city, saying, No, my lord, hear me. I give you the field, and I give you the cave that is in it. In the presence of the sons of my people, I give it to you. Bury your dead, excuse me. And Abraham bowed before the people of the land. He spoke to Ephron in the hearing of the people of the land, saying, If you will only please listen to me, I will give the price of the field. Accept it from me, that I may bury my dead there. Then Ephron answered Abraham, saying, My lord, listen to me. A piece of land worth 400 shekels of silver, what is that between me and you? So bury your dead. Abraham listened to Ephron, and Abraham weighed out for Ephron the silver which he had named in the hearing of all the sons of Heth. 400 shekels of silver, commercial standard. Okay. What do we think?
I don't know, but I feel kind of like Abraham when it comes to horse racing. I never did quite ever get the hang of it, I guess.
You ever got the best deal?
Somebody did.
It wasn't you.
It wasn't necessarily me. It's interesting, though. I mean, the way the play back and forth. The owner knew he was going to get paid for it when they started, but it had to be worked out. Evidently, according to the proper way to show each other their need. But I was, reading some of the notes in the Bible, and they say that the 400 shekels was a very high price for that particular piece of property. In other words, Abraham got stuck a little bit on the deal. But he didn't quibble. He just simply paid the price and figured he did.
it's a passage that if you read it kind of very superficially, you just kind of read through it as narrative, as a story, it's easy to come to this conclusion that, they were trying to actually give the land to Abraham. And that's, again, it's not like that's totally not there, but it's missing really the content. It certainly doesn't countenance the actual result. So neither one of them have a real expectation that this is going to be free. And, there's an old saying, the first one that speaks loses. And, that's so they're trying to kind of position one another in a certain way to make the other one give the starting point. And Abraham's willingness to pay it may or may not reflect the actual value of the land. Who knows what I don't know if he had, what do they call them when you buy a house, the comparables or whatever, the sheet of this, okay, this house, same square foot, 2 blocks down, cost this. And, I don't know if he had all that going on. It's kind of like when you go, I think a better comparison probably for us would be going to the funeral home after a dearly loved one has just passed away, and you haven't prepaid or pre-planned the funeral at all. And you sit down and Carrie's across the other side, and Carrie's a nice guy and everything, but he's going to probably give you sticker shock when you see what that stuff costs, and you didn't, I don't know if they still do. Years ago, Costco, you could buy your casket at Costco, and they'd, I guess, deliver it to home. So when you died, your family could just put you in it, I guess, and put it in the back of your own pickup truck and drive you down there or something. I don't know, but it's the time of mourning is not usually the time to try to cut costs, and it's kind of hard to do that. Making shrewd deals and all that requires some level of detachment and and I'm not trying to criticize Kerry at all. He's got to make a living, so but that's it. It is. You people, if you haven't paid for a funeral within 5 or 10 years and you go to the funeral home, a lot of times it's a real big shock on what things cost. And so that's kind of, I think, a better mindset for Abraham, for us, is to look at it that way, that Abraham is just willing to pay and just be done, and he's not going to negotiate, really. He didn't want to set a price that made him look cheap or insult the owner of the land. He wanted the land, and he, at the same time, nobody wants to, be totally ripped off or anything either. So he kind of waits and is patient, and ultimately, I like the way Ephron puts it. What's 400 shekels of silver between men such as us? We're above all that mundane, stuff like that. And evidently, it was enough money where they noticed, and he acted like he wouldn't notice, but he that was setting the price. That's how much the land's going to cost you, 400 shekels of silver. And Abraham buys it. He just goes straight forward and pays for it, and that is where Sarah is buried. Any other thoughts on?
Well, we've done that. If you've gone to garage sales, you've done that. If they don't happen to be marked or whatever, or even if they're marked, you ask them what their price is, and they, well, what do you want? What do you, and you're hesitant to give them a price before you find out what they're willing to, start at or whatever. Yeah, it's kind of, like you said, you don't want to be the first one to say a number.
Well, speaking of garage sales, I was at one in Ocean Shores one time, and they had this mystery bag that was labeled like 25 cents or something. I thought, well, whatever's in there's got to be worth 25 cents. No, it wasn't. They got paid 25 cents. I paid them 25 cents to haul off some of their junk. I mean, it wasn't worth anything. So, lost 2 bits there, but that's the way life goes sometimes. But yeah, it's like when families go out to eat together and the dads are, oh, I got it, you got it, and They want to act. Each one want to act like they're going to pick up the check until just enough so that they don't actually get stuck with the check, but not look like they're being cheap, which is exactly what they're doing. So that's Mark doesn't know anything about that kind of thing. So, but that's I'm picking on Mark tonight, maybe a little too much. I don't know. But that's kind of what's happened. It's just kind of a negotiation. Abraham identifies himself as a stranger and a sojourner. Verse 4. So I'm a foreigner. I'm an undocumented immigrant walking through this land with a whole bunch of money and a whole bunch of family and a whole bunch of sheep and goats and cattle and all that stuff and a few donkeys, a few slaves.
Come on, refer to the sentence in your outline so people will know why I sang that song.
Well, that's what's in there. He said he identifies himself as a stranger and a sojourner, and he's just a poor wayfaring stranger. That's all I am. And the people he's talking to, the kids have some colloquialisms for that. I'm not going to use any of them tonight, but they call him on that, I guess is the best way to put it. They say, basically in the negotiation is, no, you're not. You are not a poor wayfaring stranger. You are a wealthy prince. You are a mighty prince, a prince of God. Different ways of translating that. You are a big deal. We know you got a lot of money. We know you ripped off Pharaoh. We know you ripped off Abimelech. You got all their money. We can see your estate before you. You ain't poor. You're no charity case. So Abraham is really setting himself up in the negotiations, and then they're just not buying it at all. And when we know what we know about Abraham, especially the dealings with Abimelech, but to Pharaoh to some extent, we know, Abraham has a little penchant for not giving you the full story, right? He may tell you the truth. He might not tell you anything but the truth, but he ain't going to tell you the whole truth, right? And that's what you're supposed to do, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Well, he gave you the truth and maybe nothing but truth, but not the whole truth. So they've done their homework. They've done their due diligence. They know what Abraham is capable of paying. And they're not buying this. I'm just a poor wayfaring stranger from him. And, I think some of our that song is a beautiful song. And sometimes we feel that, don't we? But other people, when they hear us sing songs like that, it's kind of like, well, I know where you live. I've seen your house. I know what you drive. I know where you went on vacation last year. I know. Who are you saying you're a poor wayfaring stranger? They call us on that too. And for this world to not be our home, well, a lot of us are pretty comfortable here, aren't we? And if we get too comfortable here, it's kind of hard to anticipate something else, isn't it? And as we get older, a lot of us, it's not that we want a new home. We don't want necessarily a mansion on the hilltop. We look forward to all the aches and pains going away. We look forward for the mortal to be transformed into the immortal more than we look forward to 3 more bedrooms or something like that. That's just more house to clean, isn't it? So, they're calling Abraham out. You're not a poor wayfaring stranger. You're a prince, a mighty prince, a prince of God. So don't give us this poor wayfaring stranger story. We ain't buying it. No one has laid a hand on you. No one can lay a hand on you. You go out to war with kings and you take all their stuff. And then you're so wealthy you don't even keep any of it. But they're not quite that fine in their response. They're a little more subtle than I'm being right now. So they're not really buying it. And but then Abraham prefers to say, you'll give me a spot, some spot, any spot. your spot, basically. He knows he's picked it out. This is where I want to bury her. He goes, right. Let me just talk to Ephron over there. And so that's the land he wants. And Ephron is willing to negotiate and makes a price, and he just pays it. So at the same time, whether or not people see Abraham as a poor wafer, whether the world sees him that way, Abraham left a lot behind, didn't he? He left his father's house behind. He has wandered. He gave up to Lot the direction he would go in. Lot chose one way. Abraham was left with whatever Lot didn't want. And Abraham, all throughout his life, he had all these other things, but what he really wanted was a son with Sarah. And most of his life, he didn't have it. He had to wait a really long time to get it. So in a way, he was just a stranger and a sojourner. He's really kind of the advanced scout. He's walking through the land. This is going to be my heirs way down the road. There's a lot of the water underneath the bridge before they get to it. But he's kind of mapping out the land. This is going to be our land. And with the payment, he locks it in. He's buying, in a sense, all of Canaan. It doesn't, his price for the field may have been high. His price for all of Canaan, that was probably a pretty good deal. And he didn't get the legal title to it. But this is the theological point that, okay, this is our home. And this comes with, as Ed brought out, this is Sarah's burial. This is where she's at. This is where our other patriarchs and matriarchs are buried. This is our home. This is our camp. This is our Wagner. If you all have been to Wagner and loved it, I'm glad you had a good time. This is our home. Now, all of it. So it establishes that claim in their own hearts and their own minds to this piece of property. So they can come back later. There's no doubt that for the Hebrews and for, I guess you could say later, the Israelites, the Jewish people, that the Old Testament, as we call it, the scriptures as they would call it, were written to defend the conquest to the subsequent generations. This is why we can do this. This is why we can come into land occupied by other people, kill them, and take their land. A lot of empires and a lot of countries have done that sort of thing throughout human history. You want some land, you kill the people that aren't and take it. History is not usually particularly kind to people and nations that do that sort of thing. Israel has this whole trace of their history to say, this is our land. We have every right to it. God, Almighty God, the only God, gave us this land. And these heathens were sitting on it, but he didn't like them and he wanted us to kill them. So we did that. And it is our land, free and clear. We have quieted title to this land. And we even paid for it up front anyway. So there's that aspect to what's going on here too. They've got to come back and take this land. They're looking back and this is our property. You're squatters. We're the owners. And squatters' rights are up. Now, that's a very simplistic way of describing what happened. And we know they didn't really possess the land, to conquer the land the way God wanted them to conquer it. And that caused problems down the road. But they want to be judged by history favorably. They know how this looks. It doesn't look good, does it? Really, just on if you look at it from a non-theological point, one nation invades another nation, kills everybody, and takes their land. Genocide. Genocide's a 4-letter word where I come from. That's all we can come up with is 4-letter words. That's all. Longer than that, we don't know what they are. But, so Israel is mindful of how they're going to look, and this is setting that up. Why we can come back, why we can take this land away from the Hittites and the Hivites and the Canaanites and the Jebusites and all the other ites. Why we can do this. Any other thoughts on that passage before we move on? Verses 17 through 20. So Ephron's field, which was in the Machpelah, which faced Mamre, the field and cave which was in it, and all the trees which were in the field that were within all the confines of its border were deeded over to Abraham for a possession in the presence of the sons of Heth before all who went in at the gate of the city. After this, Abraham buried Sarah his wife in the cave of the field at Machpelah, facing Mamre, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. So the field and the cave that is in it were deeded over to Abraham for a burial site by the sons of Heth. It was deeded over, and there were a whole bunch of witnesses. This transaction happened. It happened openly. Money was paid. It was not a purely an act of kindness or charity. This was an arm's length transaction. This is our land. And the location evidently was somewhere about halfway between the southern border. We talked about Beersheba last week. It's the southern border of Israel, kind of the legal border. Whether or not they went beyond that, it's kind of different, but they looked at Beersheba as their southern border. And it's about halfway between, the burial site is halfway between Beersheba and their capital city, Jerusalem. So Sarah is kind of pointing them to where they will ultimately raise their flag. This is our home. This is where we're going to build the temple. This is where we're going to build the king's palace. This is our home city, and pointing them in that direction. Any other thoughts on this passage? You might be really lucky to get out a couple minutes early.
Well, until you said that, I was gonna have you go back over that, about the price that Jesus paid
Okay.
in your outline. But
Well, he bought us. Abraham bought this land. Jesus bought us with something that's a lot more valuable. However much 400 shekels was, Jesus' blood was much more. Whatever amount of money anyone on the world can come up with, Jesus is worth more. Jesus is worth more than our national debt. That's how much Jesus is worth. It's hard if you see those tickers, how much our national debt is. You might not sleep for 2 or 3 nights, but don't worry about it. When you owe the bank $10,000, you got a problem. When you owe the bank $10 million, they've got a problem. So the government's going to be just fine. We may not be, but the government will be fine. So there is this idea of purchasing a possession, a land, a home. Jesus went to prepare a place for us. That intimates that it wasn't already in existence before Jesus came to earth. I go to prepare a place for you. It's not fully prepared. So, this paying a price, this redeeming, this idea of acquiring, and Jesus did it too. So Abraham does it, Jesus did it. Any other thoughts? Okay, Mr. Kelso is going to lead us in our closing prayer. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.